Hi, Danielle. Welcome back. How are you?
I'm amazing. How are you, Mel?
Yeah, I'm very good. It's very good to report that the week has consistently been a much bigger improvement on previous weeks.
Those were doozies. Yeah. And we're at the end of the cycle. We are sitting inside of new moon energy. We're here and what our intentions are. And,
Yeah,
it's kind of like this natural push to who and what we want to be and do so that, we're uh, a higher, better version of the self that we created.
yeah, and that is exactly where we're going to go because the new moon often gives us the opportunity. We've done this a few times before to think about what intentions we want to set up for the next month and energy we want to bring in. But it feels like this is definitely a theme that has come through different things that I've read, and definitely a theme that we're exploring together about, similar to the last podcast that we did, which is about pursuing happiness,
Right.
um, and how to create the life that we want. So this is part two of creating the life that we want and the pursuit of happiness. And it could actually be the pursuit of just feeling better, of feeling better than you did yesterday, feeling peace, feeling joy, whatever that is. But it's the pursuit of something, moving towards something that moves us out of a state that we don't want. And in that session, in that episode, we looked at quite in depth actually of where we have maybe come from. And when I say we're talking about our own experiences, but anyone that's listening,
Right. It's a
is
collective.
it's a collective, and lots of people have been on a journey where they may, and in that conversation, not be that aware of why they're feeling what they're feeling, but they just know they don't like where they're at and what they feel, and it doesn't feel good. Then they can move into a place of developing some understanding of that, whether that's through friends or therapy or just this choice of, I've got to start doing something different. So, what we thought we would cover this time, as we have in earlier episodes to some degree, but this really is about we leveling up, moving this up into an even higher zone of previously is what trips us up, where even if we are starting to experience happiness and life has improved, well, now what actually gives us the wings, what gives us the ability to soar above our previous perceptions of who we are through our previous experiences that we may never need to ever experience again, what gives us this capacity to move from surviving to thriving, what
Right.
gives us the ability to develop the trust that may have started in the very first part of the process of, I try these little things and I'm noticing that feels better than it did the day before. And
Right.
process language is really useful, especially for mantras. If you want to feel happy, you can't just go, I am happier and happier every day if you're feeling depressed and anxious.
Right.
But what you can say is, I'm feeling happier and happier more and more at a time, if there's
Right.
a level of truth in that. Or I am, more of the time I'm feeling more energetic or I'm feeling more vibrant. Because
Yeah.
once you start to apply, and that's what we're going to look at, any one of the things that we're talking about today, the key element of this is consistency, the
Yes.
element of choice and the decision. And it takes a bit of practice when we're
It
talking
does.
about behavior change in psychology. Some people say 30 days, some say 60, some say 90. But actually, when I was listening to a recent episode of Sadhguru, and he was talking about the different tools that we can use to create the life that we want, he's actually been working and with some scientists and some of the research that's become available where they can actually see the changes in the brain. So people who meditate more have more grey matter,
Right.
create more neural pathways for those other states that they might not have experienced
Isn't
because of
that
the
something?
plasticity in the brain.
Yeah. It's just
And
it's always
then
it makes me giggle whenever, when spirituality becomes scientific in nature, and it's only proving the feelings that we're having or experiencing
Yeah.
to be right or to correct, or on this the alignment to the path that you've already been, walking.
Well, we are certainly moving into a new world, really, in that sense, that not only are we seeing, and I've been tracking this for at least 10 years, even though I've been in the field of psychology, therapy, and all that for over 25. Certainly in the last 10 years, I've made a conscious effort to read and listen to so much stuff. And spirituality, science, religion are all coming together, because what we see is like Greg Baden, who I don't know how many ologies he's got several, and at the moment most of that sits within cosmology, but he's from a science background,
Right.
but he's spent a large amount of time studying like the impact of meditation and mindfulness on the brain, and some of the other sciences coming through when we have a look at what chemicals are responsible for increasing our sense of well-being and happiness. Is this and Sadhu Guru was talking about this last time when I listened, that we will start to see these changes in the brain if we look at these we've got brain imagery techniques and technology now that we didn't have 10 years ago.
Right.
And they've also got a way of seeing what the functions are that happen and the chemicals that are released. And he talks about a chemical BDNF, brain-derived neurofactor, I think it's called. And if you, the key to the simplicity of it is if you make choices that when you wake up in the morning, for example, and you apply the Mel Robbins rule of 5 seconds of, oh, the alarm's gone off, I'm just going to go back to sleep. Well, you've wasted 5 seconds and you've now gone into a different state. If you choose within that 5 seconds, I'm just going to get out of bed, I'm going to go in the shower. It takes a bit of practice, but Mel Robbins also came, we've talked about our own experiences, from a deep, dark state of depression when actually her life, from her, the way she's talked about it, was falling apart. The business, she owed loads of money, the business was falling apart, the marriage wasn't doing too great, and she was in a proper funk. And she just realized, I think for months on end, she just covered her head up and went to bed. And then at some point a shift occurred, and this is where this idea of 5 second rule come in. There isn't enough time for the brain to bring in entertain any other ideas. Is you just get up, you don't wait for motivation, you make a decision. I'm going to get up, I'm going to do my yoga, I'm going to get up, I'm going to get on my bike, I'm going to go for a walk, I'm going to do this, going to do that. And like lots of things, it can take you can do it for a few days, and I've done it with yoga. I get to like day 4 and it's like, oh, making today, and you've got to get through that resistance. You've got to get through, because the body now, what it'll do, it'll say, there's too many changes going on here, I don't recognize it, I'm not sure I want these new neural pathways, or for you to feel any better, because I'm not quite sure what happens when you feel better and when you enter into this new space.
Right.
So I'm going to pull you back to the zone that you recognize, which is the head under the covers.
Yeah. And spiritually speaking, that is the ego, right? It only likes what is known, what it can exist in. It's like a safety net of sorts for it. And, the unknown is a very fearful, scary place for the ego in this unknown realm of, this could be better. But consistency is definitely key to any type of forward, momentum you're trying to make or
definitely
take. Yeah.
Yeah. And momentum is a key word, because it's the same in, I remember discovering this when I started doing meditation, that the momentum of doing it every day at 5 minutes or 10 minutes or 20 minutes a day, rather than 3 hours once a week. And Abraham Hicks talks about this a lot in the talks that they do about momentum gathering, because what that does, it's interesting on an energetic level. If you keep at it, you will start to feel and see some really reliable, credible examples of things starting to change when you apply it.
Yeah, you're very right. It seems insurmountable what the changes can be, or the time that you perceive to have in your daily routine.
Yeah.
So I am a busy mother. I have a lot of animals, a lot of kids, a spouse. I keep myself busy, a blossoming career. So what I've done when I've, meditation for me isn't this, when you think meditation, it's not, it's
like
not
sitting cross-legged for an hour, breathing,
exactly
and switching
breathing
off, yeah,
or watching, the kaleidoscope imagery on the YouTube channel or whatever you're watching. Or listening to the mantras or the I am affirmations. Now, in the beginning of this journey to being in my now and being in this blissful nature that I sit inside of, I did take more time out in the in the affirmation statements, because I did know, even without knowing anything, that the nicer, the more kind I was to myself and the way I talked to myself, the more of a reflection I would have within me. And I did take note of that almost immediately. And so I am affirmations became a staple of me every morning. Like you said, you were when you sit in this depressive nature, to say things like I am happy or I am in love with myself seem really far-fetched.
yes.
But when you start to realize that your choices are going to make or break this journey that you're on, saying the affirmation statements kind of trick this brain, this ego system that says I don't like change, into change. And it doesn't even realize it. So I am worthy, I am without shame, I am love, I am dedicated. Things like those simple statements as soon as you wake up. So I know that we talk about just getting out of bed and just going. I'm not a morning person in that way. I always say I need a solid 4 hours before I'm ready. But I have,
I do too, but I won't do anything if I do 4 hours.
But so for me, it's like I started off with the I am these affirmation statements of being worthy enough, or deserving enough to feel differently than what I felt. And so that became a ritual, if you will, as a sacred moment for myself to meditate upon the reasons why I am, worthy or sacred enough to feel differently than what I was feeling in that current moment. And being of the busy nature that I am, I have learned to make ritual out of almost everything I do, even from getting in the shower. I become grateful for the ancestors that created access to, running water with, with a hot water tank that allows me to take a very relaxing shower. I walk outside barefoot, well, minus the deathly cold of winter. I walk out barefoot and I fill up the bird feeders, and I fill the water up for, the chickens and the dogs, and I can feel the sunlight upon my face, and I stand under the sun and I say that I'm grateful for what it is that I'm experiencing. And then when I move forward an hour later to, feed the animals, at this point, I walk out through my front door and I stand in the grass, and I call in the white light. I call in the energy of the sun. I find myself grateful in nature, and I call in my angels, and I call in the masters that assist me. I call in my highest timeline. I call in my highest self. And this, before 10 a.m., is 3 separate rituals that I have done just inside of my day-to-day activity.
Yeah.
I make it a point that every morning I turn on meditation music, because I learned really quickly that any of these hurts going on through meditative music set my body into a different tone.
Yeah.
It wasn't as wiry. It wasn't as, this nervous energy that had been consuming me for so long. I was really taking note. And that wasn't 30, 60, 90 days. That was an immediate, whoa, I kind of feel different when I'm listening to this, and it doesn't have lyrics that kept my mind busy. Instead, it's like this nice frequency that keeps me calm. And now my thoughts are more calm and my reactions are more calm. And now I feel like my day might be a little bit more calm.
Yeah, definitely. I think I noticed, and we can go through phases of how, when we apply that, what we notice in that can change, can't it? But even though I've been practicing yoga now for, gosh, I don't know what it is, maybe 8 years. And I used to go once a week. And then I started doing it more at home. But after my car accident, and because I've got a low thyroid, so I just don't seem to be missing a lot of energy that other people seem to be bountiful in. But after the car accident, and the point that you just made as well, is I just felt every morning like incredibly heavy and sluggish.
Yeah.
And even though my diet is fairly good, what I did start to do was I changed the way that I did the routine. So 1, it was getting up. 1, 2, it was having a bath or a shower. 3, it was doing some of those mindsets of recognizing there's a loop about to pop into my head about anything, work, people, whatever. Okay, let's not entertain that. Let's give it a new neural pathway. I'm not entertaining that thought. It's not helpful. I'm going to look at thoughts that are helpful. So whether it is I am, or whether it is just choosing to think of an image, because you can think of images instead of images that are coming in. So by the time I've got down to the bottom of the stairs, at the same time, not long after the accident, because I was very sore and I was stiff all over, and it was a very physiological experience. Mentally, I was fine, but the physiology of it was powerful. And I'd done this healing course, which was Quantum Touch, which is a lot about breath. So I decided to integrate the two things. So when I came down in the morning, even though I felt very stiff, I felt like, I used to say, like a bag of potatoes, just really, really heavy.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'd start this breathing process of I'm moving my hands up and down, a bit like they do in Qigong, and would run this process about 3 to 5 times, then do the yoga. And as you say, put the music on, because equally, if I play something that is, I just tune into, it's a whole different zone I go into. It's very like this whole other world opens up. And I go into that process in whatever form of yoga I'm doing. Sometimes I'm very tired. So I do yin yoga, which is really just not even holding a move. You're laying in the move,
Right.
and you're getting a deep stretch because it goes right into the fascia. And also it releases traumas to some degree that are held in the body. So that part of that processing of what the trauma was in the body after an accident, it can help that. So sometimes I do the yin yoga, and sometimes I do the yang, which is more active, which is the downward dog and the plank, and the whole cycle, the moon cycle, everything. So it didn't matter so much what yoga I did. I started to learn to tune into my body. How I'm a tired, I'm a mentally tired, is it physical tired, and do this breathing. And what I noticed, not straight after the accident, because I was sore and achy for several months, but I did start to notice that I could actually feel my energy rising and the heaviness start to dissipate, and this more content feeling coming in like a wave, and the other feelings dissipate. And that alone then motivated me to do it every morning on the mornings that I was feeling,
because you knew the results of it. Yeah.
Because I was really experiencing the results.
That's, which is nice. It is.
Yeah.
And mine was always more mental, I could move around, but it wasn't my physical body that was keeping me heavy. It was my mental clarity, and one of the steps that I would take inside of the shower, because, you have your frequency music on, your meditation music, whatever, frequency or hertz you're choosing. And then when you get in the shower, so even if you don't listen to this music in the shower, it still has kind of a general effect, because, we talk about the internal versus external world. If you think about the meditation music, the frequency and how it affects water, right? Yeah. Certain frequencies affect water in different vibrational patterns.
Yeah, Dr. Emoto work showed how the vibration of water changed.
Yeah. And it's absolutely mind-boggling, that we're not using this more often, because we are made up of so much water, inside of our system.
Yeah.
And then when you get in the shower would be the place for the most pervasive of thoughts would come for me. I'm standing alone in a shower. There's nothing to keep me distracted. There's, my best arguments, would happen inside of my head, inside of the shower, where the shampoo bottles were congratulating me for how well I stood up for myself finally. But what I would do inside of this ritual would, after being grateful, because believe it or not, gratefulness is a major key to
it's even in psychology,
success.
they're recognizing gratitude.
Yeah, it's a big thing.
A key thing to do. Yeah.
I would always ask inside of water, because water is such an amazing conductor. They tell you that time at the sea, or at the lake, or in a bath water, or in a pool, can really change who, like,
well, it's a conductor as well, isn't it?
Yeah,
so frequencies, it's a conductor of that. So it is huge.
It is. And so when I would get in the shower, to this day, actually, this is not something I've changed. I consistently do this. I consistently do the I am affirmations. I consistently thank and become thankful, grounding, all of it. When I get in the shower, I ask for mental clarity. And that I come from a higher perspective. I ask for the clarity of the gods. And from that point on, I notice a shift in whatever it is that my thought patterns are, and they come into a higher frequency, if you will. They come from a higher perception of what it might be I was thinking of. And even if it's not a negative thought, even when I'm sitting here in blissful, la la land, I can get in the shower and I ask for clarity of thought, and boom, here comes this beautiful pathway to something that I've been kind of wondering about, or, wanting to write about, or wanting to speak about. And it's like, just as easy as opening a door, it just, boom, drops in on you. And so there's all these little things that you can do during your hectic day, your hectic schedule, that can help bring you into alignment to this place that you're wanting, that pursuit of happiness that we're talking about, right? These things right here are the pursuit. And you're not having the end goal in mind. You're just creating sacred moments throughout your day that bring a sense of clarity, a sense of peace, a sense of understanding from maybe a chaotic experience can now be soothed over and easier to understand, because you are now taking this into a ritual of forms, an experience where you have a new level of clarity that you didn't before, because you were putting into effect the things that you want, right? By saying, I am this, or I am grateful, or I desire clarity inside of this shower experience or water experience.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing about I am is Paul Selig talks about this in quite a few of the talks he's done, or in the books. Is the I am statement sounds like in isolation, a spiritual concept that people can struggle to wrap their heads around. But basically, if you say, I am stupid, I'm wrong, I'm always getting this wrong, I am not capable, I am not. So these are kind of internal statements that people make all the time, and sometimes they're made externally by somebody else to somebody. And the moment you say I am, you are claiming ownership of the statement that you've just made.
Yeah.
So if you change the I am statement to, and it's got to be something that you're not going to actually mentally reject. So I am getting stronger and stronger each day was one of the ones I used to use after the accident. I am getting more clarity. I have more vitality. I am, I am resourceful. I am grateful. I am, and whatever that I am is. So that's one of the interesting things that he helped me understand, was why that is such a powerful thing. Because when language is massively powerful, and language is magic in action, because words can use to create and break.
Well, it's like a spell, right?
Yes.
Your words create spells that become your reality. Yeah. And when you're busy being negative to yourself, your body doesn't, even if you're joking, your body doesn't know the difference. Your mind
your brain doesn't know the difference. So he takes it as though it is a truth.
As it's truth.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the truth now is created in this this negative form, in this darker form, in this lower aspect form. So just flip the script on it, you know,
Yeah.
and don't even tease yourself about being ugly or stupid or not worthy or any of the things
Yeah,
that
don't
we
even do it.
create,
Yeah.
or whoever decided one day to tell you, you know,
Yeah.
and allow yourself instead to say, I'm not any of those things. Instead, today I am going to be beautiful. I am going to be worthy. I am this and this and this. And watch you know, these patterns inside of your brain function, the way it thinks, the way it speaks to you inside of thoughts, to become, well, the magical spell unleashed. And it really is a game changer.
Yeah, massively. And it's why we call it a spell checker. when we I use spell checkers all the time in my work with having some level of dyslexia that I've got to do that. But
Yeah.
it's interesting, isn't it? When we unpack our language, it's really important that we start to understand how we use the language against ourselves, let alone the language through the,
like, I never win. Well, guess what?
Yeah.
You're never going to feel, even if you want.
I am not able to.
Yeah.
I can never do that. Yeah. So the language, and starting to notice that again is making a decision to focus and see what it is that emanates from us. And one of the other interesting areas that I remember discovering, and this is the beautiful thing about consistency, that what motivates me to try and be consistent in anything that I conjure up as something I'm going to do for a few weeks. Because I've set myself a few goals. I never used to be goal orientated, but I've set myself a few goals. And through the meditation has been the yoga and meditation has been an interesting experience, because I've never really, I have sat there for maybe an hour or 2 hours at particular times, but with the process of coming down every morning and doing that breathing activity and then maybe doing some yoga, I would then, because yoga is actually really just to limber up the body so that meditation is actually more comfortable experience. And so if you sit down and do the meditation, and if you've not done it before, you just need to focus on your breath in, you breathe out, you breathe in, you breathe out. And that is starting that process. And the focusing on your breath means that the brain might work hard initially, but the thoughts will start to unravel and won't be so pervasive.
Yes.
But what I started to notice with that, the next gig, and it's an individual experience for everyone, because we've all got our own paths. But I was sitting down and I was focusing on breath, and I could get into a really almost blissed out state of being totally relaxed, really, really still. And I loved the experience of stillness.
Yes.
So I would enjoy just being so still, to the point that all I'm aware of is my consciousness. I don't even notice my body anymore. And then I started to notice, like what you said, ideas would drop in. Yeah. And then another idea would drop in. So if I'm working on a project or something like that, and I'm like, stop this, I'm trying to meditate. But what happened, and I remember reading this in a book last year, and I can't even remember what book it was. It was saying that what can sometimes happen is the creative inspiration starts to drop in. And then when I was listening to Abraham Hicks the other day, and I talked to you about an experience I'd had recently, that I'd had my headphones on and I was playing a piece of music that I absolutely adore at the moment. And I was sat in a Costa with the headphones in, and there were children running around quiet. So I did turn it up because there was a bit of screaming going on as well. And I tuned into this music. And again, this is a more recent experience as a result of being still a lot. Yes. And tuning into my body and doing body scans and breathing from it. I do that most mornings because I'm now intrigued to see what happens if I do this, what happens next. And so I sat in that Costa and I was listening to the music, and I could feel the music all over, just like if I sit in my room and meditate. And I wasn't meditating in Costa, I was just enjoying the stillness and the calm and the experience. And in the meditation, when those ideas come in, a few times I've gone, right, okay, I have to put a pad next to me. And sometimes I've come out of the meditation, wrote all the ideas down. Right, okay, can I go back into the meditation?
Yeah. And I've done that before. And it's It's funny because the more you get used to being in this now and in this
Yes.
state of being that, I would really recommend most people to strive to be in. Uh, I find myself running across one piece of the house to the next, or if I'm out, so say I'm at the grocery store waiting on grocery pickup, and I'll have this massive idea fall through. I'll just start putting it on my phone, and then I'll copy it so that later I can paste it back into whatever that was, and then begin to write from there on it, because it becomes this natural state of being. And then the information just starts to flood in because you're clearing space. But how do we get there is the question, right? And so, because, this is a process here, now so we're just going to base this from this phase one that we just walked out of in the last podcast, which was the neutrality zone. We're trying to reach neutrality. Now we're trying to reach a state where our mind isn't boggled down so that we can be in this moment. And inside of that, you need to this all goes back. This always remains inside of choices. This always remains inside of perception. Okay. And so we're making the choice to actively pursue ourselves in the same way that we went from negative to neutral into positive. So now we kind of have a new set of tools. Now we kind of recognize that we can sit in neutrality. Now we can move that on up the scale into the other side of that polarity, which is this positive nature. And, I'm going to take us back to the new moon. We're in the new, we're still in the new moon energy. Intention speaks volumes. You begin to intend the life that you want, and it starts as a thought. And then that thought needs to be written down on a piece of paper. And even if you're not spiritual in nature, let's just even say the religious side of these things, they ask you to out loud speak to the person you're praying to, right? And inside of this, you begin to ground in the idea of what it is you're pursuing. And when you begin to make that intention and walking that into the manifestation cycle, what you're doing is you're saying to yourself internally, you're saying it to your ego, you're saying it to your physical body, you're saying it to your spirit, your spiritual form, your heart, your soul, whatever you want to call it. Hey, by the way, I'm ready. By the way, I am eager to take these next steps because I'm beginning to figure out that I am in charge of this, and being in charge of this gives me responsibility that I can be in control of. And so I'm going to start this by writing down my intentions, praying about my intentions, washing away my intentions, doing whatever it is that feels right within you to taking that next step. And so the intention and the way that I've really put this into my mind because it helps me is understanding the cycles of the moon, right? That the moon is always there, whether regardless if she's showing herself or not, she's there. She's either being covered in darkness so that we need to create the light, or she's at full illumination. So when you think of her and her darkness, which would be the dark moon, also known as, the new moon. When you go into this new moon, you literally say, this is the things that I would like to focus on for the next month. And a month isn't that hard. 1 month of a dedicated service to yourself is not so overwhelming that you can't do it. So for this month, I'm going to focus on how to be content in my day-to-day life. And you write that thing down, you pray that thing out loud, you speak it to whatever it is that feels right to you. And you're taking your next step towards the higher levels of this polarity scale.
And if you focus on one thing, and this is something that we were taught when I learned NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, is that sometimes when we're learning a new skill, we need to just learn one or two. So at the time we were learning about the different ways that people communicate: auditory, kinesthetic, visual, and the language. So in order to connect with somebody, you might use the same visual language or auditory language, but it's a bit like when you're driving a car, there's so many components that sometimes you just have to focus on learning one of those things. And it's the same with an intention. So If you're having problematic relationships, you could be intending to have relationships that are smoother and filled with respect. If you're having difficulties at work, I intend to have a good working relationship with people.
Yeah.
If it's about assertiveness, I intend to become more assertive. So you focus on that one thing, and you're right. The strength of the intention and the focus of that for each moment gives your brain, because the brain likes a job. And so rather than, like we've talked before, trying to clear out all the stuff that's in there that's no good, and Abraham, again, Hicks talks about this, is you don't really pay attention to that stuff. You know it's there and it will have a grip and it can be pervasive, but the less attention you give to it, the less you drive down that motorway of where all those thoughts reside, the less it will actually gravitate or pull your attention to it. So if you intend to feel better, do better, and you can be a bit specific, is then your brain will start to create those neural pathways. And when you visualize yourself with that intention having worked out, so you visualize yourself or feel into it, I see myself as having joyous, harmonious conversations with my work colleagues, or I see this particular scenario on Saturday actually working out in this way, the way that I would like, rather than the way that I try and predict, because it's one of those what ifs that you talked about.
Yeah.
Is you give the brain on a hypnotic and NLP level, you give the brain a memory that it hasn't had yet. So you create a memory of the future through the intention for the desire that you have and the visual that you have, and you place it there, but it's in the atmosphere. It hasn't happened yet, but your brain, it's almost like a radar. It now has a lighthouse to work towards.
Yeah. And now the ego has that safety net that it so desperately needs in order to feel satiated. So it's not so fearful.
Because it's got to get, the brain needs material. So we can't get rid of the stuff. We just, like what you were saying in the last episode, we accept that that's the way we feel right now. We accept that's the funk we're in. Then when we use opportunities like the new moon, because we need symbolicness in nature, we need metaphors, we need things that draw our attention away from ourselves when we haven't quite got the capacity to do it, sustain it, or make it stick. So if we use the moon as a metaphor, whether you believe in astrology or not, is you see the moon is sometimes, like what you said, in shadow, and sometimes it's illuminated. So the illumination is to help us shine a light on where we're at and maybe what we don't want, and shine a light on what we do. And if it's in shadow, it shines a light on the things that maybe we might ignore. So let's illuminate, let's create some sense of importance around. And what we want can be really simple things. Not that we want a house, want a car, want to win the lottery. Well, yeah, they're not good or bad desires. But let's drill it down to the day-to-day life we've got. I want to feel ease when I'm out and about, not anxiety when I go socializing. I want to feel joy in these relationships that feel quite difficult at the moment, and set the illumination and the energy into that focus. And it's been done many times in the process of NLP and hypnosis, which is where the hypnosis really working with the shadow side of the moon. You know, it goes right in there and lays a seed and a foundation, and the NLP actually gives it the direction of travel in a way, you know. And so you're given your compass, you pick up your compass, and the compass knows which way to go. And going back to your point about getting into neutrality, getting into that place where you're not absorbed in the past or the future, means that your operating system can now, it's a bit like have you ever seen them in the sky, the satellites? They'll move in the direction that they need to get that signal. And now what happens is you've got the two, you and the satellite, the operating systems, and the journey in between that you can direct yourself towards by something that looks very simple that people discard all the time, which is about putting your focus on what you want, the intention that you want.
Do not call, and this was a very confusing understanding for me, so I'm going to explain it differently, but my guides always would say, do not call attention to your weaknesses.
Exactly.
And I was like, but I'm not. But the reality is that I was. what I was doing was saying, I don't want to be this way anymore.
Yeah.
Which is calling attention to the weakness.
Which is fine at first.
At first, when you're still in this bigger picture.
To realize.
Yeah, but what's going to happen is that the pathway to get there is going to be more obstruction and obstacle course than it is a straight pathway.
Well, because it'll feel, it comes back, as you said earlier. If you call your attention to it, it comes back.
Yeah. And if you don't, and you just in this, what happens is that obstacle will kind of appear, but now because you're not calling attention to it, it doesn't seem as large and mountain-like. Now it's kind of like a little wall that you can simply climb over, because I just saw a rope and a ladder right there, and so you're going to face your realities and your truths regardless of how you take those steps. What I think what Mel and I are trying to show people is that it doesn't have to be this treacherous, sacrificial feeling to get there. You don't have to go through this immense amount of pain to reach the other side. You can still accomplish what you set out to accomplish and still face the demons that are going to appear as you walk this path. But because you are not calling attention to it, it's not that they're all going to come at once. Now it's, I'm walking blissfully as the fool and the tarot on my journey. And oh, look, the devil appeared, and it's making me realize that maybe I was playing too much inside of this materialism, or maybe I was too attached to an outcome, or maybe my expectations of my partner were too high. But now I'm seeing this instead of focusing on it. Now I'm just simply seeing it for what it is. And the path naturally starts to clear a little. Maybe I should, release that attachment in that way. Maybe the expectation was too high of somebody that's not on my journey. Maybe if I just stayed focused on myself, then I wouldn't have to be as concerned. So we're not calling attention to the weak points that we are inside of. What we're doing is calling attention to the place where we want that arrow to land, where that satellite is out there, where, the goal at the end of this trail is. And I might not reach it in 1 month, but I know I'm going to be a heck of a lot closer than I was.
And it builds it's the foundations, really. So applying because you can start with any one of these techniques and get results and skills, because belief is a very powerful thing. There's been research that shows belief and placebo are incredibly powerful, and you can have all sorts of effects with, lots of athletes can, when they're injured, and this research was done years ago, could visualize their body healing, getting better, and they would perform better at a faster rate than those that didn't do that.
Right.
So there is quite a bit of evidence to show that if you focus your mind on these things, or
and even the actual placebo effect is something that has been studied and understood, that the power of your mind is vast. Oh my goodness. It's like, whoa, I don't really have a way to express it. It's wild what your mind can create and what it can destruct. And it is up to you to make the choice if you're going to create or you're going to destruct. And so calling attention to your high points and not to your weaknesses, and saying, I would like to be more in this state of non-confrontation. So now instead of saying, I don't want to be angry all the time, you're stating that I am now going to react in a calmer way. And you're not saying I am this negative thing. Instead, you're saying, I have a goal in mind. And in this goal is a better version of me. And I want to be a better version of me. So I'm going to take the steps necessary to reach that point. Yeah.
Yeah, and we're so passionate about this because we know how powerful it is.
It
really is. You've got to decide. I think the key step is you've just got to decide that you just want to feel better, do better, have better, whatever that is. And as I said earlier and in the previous podcast, is I look back at where I was in some situations and where, a whole range of things that I can't even articulate in one breath.
Right.
That just does take my breath away, because I look back in awe of like I've said before, whose life is that, through what became, you know, simple decisions from long courses and
Oh my,
complex
it took me
conversations.
years of destructive patterns or not believing in myself enough. Now, now I have to giggle at myself in that hindsight rule, because I look back and I'm like, well, that would have literally never happened, because I would not have stayed long enough for it to happen. I would have already had enough respect and self-worth to say, this is done. And I'm creating a boundary now. And that boundary isn't to keep people out. That boundary is so that I can keep you in. And if you decide that this boundary is too far for you, then my decision is easier, because I now have the self-worth, and I have now received this level of love within myself to see these active changes. And I can't help but giggle about the person that brought me here. I'm very much in love with. She did a lot of work for me. You know, she became a lot more wise inside of the experiences for the person I am now. But it still makes me kind of giggle, like if I go back and think about a situation and I can't even pull even an ounce of anger or sadness or regret, because, you know, it's like, that's never going to happen again. You know, so.
And that's what becomes or starts to appear obscure, which was a word I was using a lot lately.
Yeah.
It does seem obscure, is that you can't even pull that feeling out. And sometimes people will ask me something when I can be in the midst of a high and low, because I think passionate people can, you know, I do the job because it's the core of who I am, but I can get angry, frustrated, and impetuous, and all sorts of those really strong emotions. And then it's fascinating, because they're very transient now. Before I get locked in them for days on end, whatever the feeling or, you know, or emotion was. And now I can experience them, because the process is much quicker, where I can experience it, observe it, work out what's that about, what do I want to do about it? I don't need to do anything about it, let it pass. I'm tired, do I need to eat, you know, like you do with the trials. Do I need a break from this? Do I need to go for a walk? Whichever. And it's all of those steps of taking that. And I think one of the key things in this that is going to be difficult for a lot of people to wrap their heads around is sometimes in the journey you have actually got to remove yourself from a proportion of people, because your energy and your ideas of what you're starting to put in place for yourself can be disrupted by people who are not even with the intention of you moving forward, not intending to disrupt that or make that difficult for you. But what happens is when your focus is on the relationship or of that working or going in a certain direction or whatever, is your focus is outside of yourself again. And you then, and it is a process that I still have to correct myself on a day-to-day basis.
Now we are literally conditioned to externalize everything in our existence.
To live this story, this narrative, this who we are, these roles, and it is all really strong stuff.
Always go back to, if it is not about yourself, your journey, or your destination, it is a distraction. And this sounds selfish, because it sounded selfish to me, because this is the opposite of who I was raised to be. But knowing that I have good intention, and I want everything in my life that surrounds me to be in a blissful nature in the same way that I'm sitting in my blissful nature. And I already know that this is a reflection of my inner world. Then why wouldn't I stay focused on me? When I focused on my attachments, when I focused on my self-righteousness,
the well-being,
my well-being, generally speaking, the world around me, my family, my animals, the people I surrounded myself with, became
shift.
And then that's when you start to notice those reflections that are not going to travel with you to the next. And it is, at the beginning, it is hard to perceive the loss of a friendship or a relationship or a job or whatever it is. But that perception quickly changes when you begin to see that you're more in alignment with who you are, with what you represent, what your needs are. And those people were not feeding that aspect. They were actually beginning to take away. It doesn't make them toxic. It doesn't make them negative. It just is where they are on their path. And that is okay. And sometimes those paths cross to teach the lessons, but then they're meant to be released so you can move forward. And and when you can see it in this grander scheme of things, taking the steps necessary to find this blissful nature that is you will begin to really align. And these big ideas, these big overwhelming thoughts become less overwhelming, become more attainable, become more in your what you can see on the horizon. I can now see this on the horizon. Before I could not, now I can. And really start to pay attention on what's going on around you, what's going on within you. When you start to see these things happen, don't pay attention to the negative, because that's the easy route. Pay attention to the things that are bringing you a sense of alignment, a sense of consistency, into the feelings that you're wanting, and focus on that.
Yeah. And the key element again is focusing, noticing, reviewing, scientifically discovering what are the things that do make you feel good. And I think you used the word earlier, the call to action. So I think I'm going to make a call to action, because it is so imperative now. We have a split in society where people are working hard to elevate themselves and feel good and be non-judgmental and work towards harmony, to a collective shift. And we've got the polar opposite of that. And I think it's going to be tricky for some people who may have that within their friendship groups and families,
right,
where you've got to work out where you're at in all that, and use that internal radar and understand, well, those good feelings are usually an indicator that you're in alignment. What do we mean by in alignment? That usually means that there's a lining up of our connection with our innates, whether we call it spirit or soul, our designed blueprint or personality. There's the alignment of a good experience, a joyful experience of bliss, of harmony, of feeling.
Right. And even if you're not spiritual or religious, you can literally say, is my brain functioning in a way that makes me okay enough to want to wake up every day, to be excited that there's opportunity in front of me? That's alignment. It doesn't even have to be, because I get it. I understand that sometimes the spiritual and religious talk can be a lot for people. So you believe that you have a brain, correct? All right. We have a brain. We have it. We see it. We've been studying it. It's things that we're learning about, all of that. So if your brain pattern now begins to have a more of the positive activity or even neutral activity, you know that you are now in alignment to what it is you need to be doing. And for me, it became a goal to continue that alignment process. How can I feel this way as often as possible, knowing that there's ups and downs to this world? How can I stay centered and aligned enough to continue that process, no matter what the external world is showing me?
And also, you need to get to that place before you start to approach some of the things that you need to approach as well, because it changes the nature of all the interactions that come from that.
Right.
So
if you can't, you will learn.
Yeah.
That is that's another lesson.
There's often, we'll get, what's a classic one? A classic one at work, and I've had it several times. You get an email from someone and you can never quite get the tone in the email as to how it was really sent across, but you can feel into it. And sometimes you're accurate and sometimes you're not. And you just think, oh, this person, spoke to you in a particular way, is bullshit. And then, you get irritated and angered by that. So the most common one is people get on Instagram, on Facebook, type things or return that email. And before you know it, you've created karma in action and this whole falling out process. However, and this is a really good one to do if you are in any relationships. when I'm in a funk, I know I can tell the difference between the mind state that I'm in than when I'm in other periods which I reside in much more of the time, which feels better, feels good.
Right.
I've ceased to make a decision to deal with anything when I'm in the funk. And I've even said to friends or people, I'm moving myself out of the equation for the time being, because I know I'm going to respond in a way that has the potential to harm the good work that we've done already.
Right. That was a beautiful boundary. Yeah.
And
we're all human, and we're going to go through these phases. I mean, even last week, I wasn't in a negative mood, but I knew I wasn't in the mood that I normally am. And so I kind of kept myself to myself, knowing that this was the breeding grounds for some type of negative behavior. And when we're talking about other people's messages to us, I think one of my favorite things I ever learned was always make the assumption that nothing is wrong until the person tells you otherwise. Yes. And I have been able to move because good. As we're empathic people, we pick up on the vibration, the feeling, and maybe
and that you can often tell anyway.
Yeah. And maybe they weren't even, maybe they were just having a bad day, but they weren't trying to be.
Or they're in a funk too, but they haven't contained it.
They haven't contained it. So for me, I have learned to just simply think that all is well until they say otherwise, because it is their responsibility to bring it to you. Otherwise, I am sitting in what we talked about last episode, the what if.
Mind reading.
Yeah. The what if. What if they're mad at me? What if I didn't do something correct? What if?
And then you play all scenarios in your head. Well, if she says this, this is all the things I'm going to say next. And if they say that,
And look how much time you wasted. Look how much space you filled that could have been filled with joyous,
You've wrote a book, haven't you, with the thoughts that run through your head, and and actually it never went in that direction.
All kinds of Lifetime movies.
Well, I said to someone today, they talked about an encounter, an experience that they'd had, and sort of elicited some thoughts about that. And I said, one of the things is we can judge something based on thoughts or actions that we've made. And if we haven't had any thoughts or actions about it, we don't know what we've prevented. It's a bit like in the field of mental health, we talk about recovery, or people, feeling a lot better because they've had a result, an intervention of some sort. But you can never quite prove what would have happened had that thing not happened. Right. If we put in the help when someone's 8 years old, have we prevented them from going into prison? Or would their life path have not gone in that direction anyway? So it's really tricky. But so we have to go back to our feelings of, I'm tired, I need to eat, I'm thirsty, because those three things pretty much underlie.
That would be a massive amount of inner child. Right. That is your inner child. I am throwing a tantrum because XYZ. And even though this seems like something that's beyond us as an adult, the reality is we very much have an inner child.
Well, that's what's triggered, isn't it? The inner child in us that would either stamp their feet, get angry, throw the toys out the pram or whatever. Which actually I did have with a colleague this week. And it was fascinating. And because I was in such a good space, I had, she does what I do sometimes, which is like email dump. And I got about 10 emails in a row. And she was obviously wired about something, because I saw the emails getting productively more enraged. And I know her pretty well. And I know her intention isn't to be like that, but something had obviously just got her going. But she has quite a fixated personality as well, so I know if she gets in a funk, she won't necessarily see it until you've sent something back. So I saw all these emails coming through. And it was one of those days where, oh really, I forgot to deal with this.
Man.
Other days in previous weeks, it's like, what?
Right.
What's that about? Well, they just,
what are you doing?
What are you doing? So I sat back and it's right, okay, how am I going to handle this? And I was close to writing a text a few times, and then instead Sometimes I go, what's wrong with you? Because you sounding really bolshy at the moment, but it depends on the relationship
Yeah, it
you've
does
got with
depend on,
people. And if
yeah.
you've got somebody that just wants to stay, and Greg Braden talks about this, that really we live in a society where we're either victim, persecutor, or rescuer.
Yep.
And we are all struck by our stories. We don't even realize we're
Mhm.
living out these stories all the time, and we're seeking characters to fulfill the next leg of the story, because it's got to unfold in a way that we predict. Otherwise, we can't handle that. No matter how trapped and difficult and awful it is, we still continue to narrate the story.
Yep.
And just, I had some friends maybe a year ago, we were talking about online dating, and one of the key questions you're asked, why did you break up? What happened to your last relationship? And it's like, well, define relationship and what do you mean by last? And then if something happened to that, what judgment are we making on that? Because I was the person at the time, at the point of decision when I made that decision. But whether that was 6 months ago or 10 years ago, that was the person at the time that
At
did
the
that.
time,
Is
yeah.
no reflection on how this might go. Because when I'm in a funk, I'm definitely going down a different timeline than when I'm in a state of like,
Yeah.
tonight we're in a good place, we're happy, we've mobilized a few things, we're both flourishing and coming up with creative ideas and everything. That's a very different timeline. So I'm going to meet people in a very different way from this point
Yeah.
perspective from that one.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. See, we are, we talk about this. Okay, so we've moved from neutrality and we've now made the intention to manifest this, because we're talking about the pursuit of happiness. So now we're manifesting the things that bring us this happiness, this perceived happiness, right? So now you've intended. So what is your next step? Your next step for that, because you did this under the guise of the 1 month period of time, that you're now taking these steps every day for 4 weeks or the 28-day cycle to create what it is that you intended. So every step, every half step, every quarter step is getting you closer to the intention that you're trying to manifest by the end of the month, right? So now there's going to be these moments where we backslide, where we say that I want to be less reactive. Well, you kind of had this back-to-back day where things just were not panning out the way you had hoped they would. And so then say your spouse or best friend or coworker is having a bad day and they kind of pop off and you become reactive. And you say something and you immediately are filled with shame and guilt and all of the things that, our human minds enjoy doing to ourselves. We now have to come back to center. Now you've taken the backslide. Okay, let's not shame it. Let's just acknowledge that this is what happened. Let's create the scenario now to say, instead of excuses, what is it that was the defining moment that allowed me to feel that my reactive nature was more important than the intention that I set at the beginning of the month? And without shame, you just acknowledge it and say, oh, I was feeling unheard all day. And every time I stepped forward to speak, somebody was telling me I was wrong, or somebody was cutting me off, or somebody was not paying attention. Okay. So now this comes back to self. Okay. So myself, and what I have to say is important. Correct.
Mm-hmm.
I feel that what I say is important. So this other person, maybe not, these people that I ran into throughout the day might not have felt the same way because they're inside of their own journey. And maybe their pathway led them to needing to be dismissive for their own stuff. And it has nothing to do with me. So when I can now acknowledge that this is about my own journey, and although I became reactive to something, I now own that. I am now accountable for my steps in that. And even though I've backslid and I'm back at the beginning, I now have a pathway I've already cleared. I've already cleared this pathway that says I could have gotten from there to here and back easily. So that means I can step forward easily. So instead of allowing this shameful, guilt-ridden nature that can occur when you do backslide, just acknowledge that it happened, be accountable for your role in it, and then continue forward. And that is something we can easily do.
Exactly. Yeah, I couldn't have said it better myself. And I think that's what happens. And we, I backslide on a regular occasion.
Because that's we've been doing
Because
this
that's
a
how we're
certain way.
designed.
Yeah,
Yeah.
well, we've been doing it a certain way for many, many years. And
Yeah.
then out of nowhere, we decide that this is not the way it's going to be anymore. Well, it's
Yeah.
going to be natural for us to misstep or slightly get off slightly from the
Yeah.
path. But now you know your way back to the path because you've already taken those steps. You've already made that intention. You're already in the process of manifesting what it is that you're wanting. So now you've you've already gotten the heavy tools out to clear the brush and so that you can see the ground. You've already put the lantern out so that you've got a little bit of a lit pathway to that place. Now you could just simply step back. But in order to do that, this goes back to the not calling attention to our weaknesses. Instead, acknowledging that this is the place that you were in, taking the accountability for yourself inside of that situation. We're not here to create the drama triangle and say, okay, next time I'm going to take a deep breath, or I'm going to say, I'm going to walk away from this. And then you'll find yourself as you continue to do this and backslide again. Maybe that backslide isn't all the way to beginning. Now, maybe it's one step back instead of all the way back. Now, maybe you stood specifically in the same position because you held your tongue. Now you're in a good place. Now you're set up for the next step. Right? Because this is part of the cycle. It's always going to re-enter your life until you've learned that portion of it. So now you're ready for that next step. Now you have new tools because now you're saying, okay, so if I stayed quiet on this and I learned how to digest my feelings, next time I'm not going to be reactive, but I'm going to state my feelings. And now you are taking another step in the right direction of manifesting this thing that you're wanting. And it didn't matter that you stepped back because what did you do? You learned from it. And so we're not going to be shameful about it. We're not going to guilt ourselves about it. We're going to instead say, I'm accountable for myself. And inside of that, I now know that if I'm reactive against a person speaking a certain way to me, that I'm going to just be quiet until I gather my own thoughts and I allow the feelings that are overwhelming for the moment to subside. And then that next round, because there's always another one that is a cycle. Now I can simply say, maybe I need a day, maybe I need an hour, but I will approach it. And then you approach it and you approach it in a calmer manner. You approach it in a way that is in alignment with who you are and what you're representing. And then you're taking that next step. And by the end of the month, by just doing things in that way, you are accomplishing so much more. And when you're in the middle of it, this is why hindsight rules so big. When you're in the middle of it, you're not realizing it. But when you look back on it, you're going to be so proud of yourself. I always tell people to, pat yourself on the back. You did real good, because we should be acknowledging the things that are pushing us or propelling us forward as much as we are aware of the things keeping us or holding us back.
Yeah. And the gaps between the backsliding and revisiting it to the degree that we might have previously done, the gaps will widen. And also the realization that shame and guilt are all, states that and feelings that are usually to do with childhood. And so if we find something particularly difficult to bypass, we don't go to the place of shame and guilt. We recognize that we're feeling that, and we might even have some understanding of where that came from. But it's not a place to visit. And it may be because they're deep ones, and they're deep ones that draw people in and get them stuck. And sometimes, and I've been told this a few times, and I have to remind myself of it as well. Sometimes when we're about to make a transition, turn a corner and go into a much better space, it can feel like the intensity of what doesn't feel right has actually increased. And we can perceive that of, there's something heavy around the corner. Our alert system is activated without realizing actually what's happening. It's almost like, I always get the phrase of Costa's last stand almost. Okay. It's like when the pattern realizes that, you know, if it was an entity in itself, the pattern or the program realizes is that you're not paying attention to it anymore, and it's not got the level of significance or relevance about it, and it starts to drop away. It's almost like it has one more grasp,
It's like final punch.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love the way you put that, because it's true. It always stands. But the reality is, as much as it's gathering all of its strength to try to keep you in that same position, this whole time you've been gathering strength to fight this dragon, this devil, this whatever you want to call your darker shadow self. It does not matter, right? That, you know, you've been accumulating tools and strength and wisdom. And now that you're facing this, you know, whatever this perceived dragon is for you, you have gained so much insight and so much wisdom, and the tools that you're now carrying are far beyond the first few times you faced this.
That you did it.
Yeah. And so they always say, you know, it's darkest before the dawn. And there's a reason for that. It's because the darkest moment of your life is the most beautiful and profound moment where you can let the light enter the space.
Well, without shadow,
without
there is no light.
Yeah, because it's
without
Exactly. It's all polarity. We live in a world of duality. If we can switch this duality of right and wrong or good and bad into more of a polarity, and you're just shifting your frequency of it, then you're going to really start seeing the results that Mel and I talk about on a consistent basis, because we are aware of how hard this can be. But we're also aware that with the right tools, guidance, and keys, you're going to fight this battle to finding yourself, to finding who you truly want to be, who you truly are by the sacred nature of the blueprint that you were born into. It can be a lighter experience. It doesn't have to be this dark war.
It doesn't have to be deep, traumatic, and difficult. And at first it will be. It's a bit.
It feels that way. Yeah, because
birth.
you don't.
You're giving
new. You haven't seen a light. You don't. What's the light? I don't know. So now you're fighting to create the light. But once you've created the light once you've created the light twice, once you've created the light three times.
Faith and hope are the two key ingredients. And whether you assign yourself any level of religious belief or not, in every bit of work I've done, the moment that the client moves out of hopelessness into hopefulness, and then get some evidence, the evidence and the hope creates the faith, and the faith is what creates the drive and the autonomy and the experience. And then that is like the boat that carries you on the waves towards your destination.
Right. And even if you were not to have any hope at the beginning, that's actually the most beautiful place to be sometimes. Without hope, without anything, I have no hope. Well, that is the moment that the sacredness of the divine, and the divine can be yourself, the divine can be nature, the divine can be whatever you assign it. That's when it allows the cracks to start to break through and allow the light to come through, because that is what we are in a scientific way and in a spiritual way. We are light beings. And even if we cover ourselves with mountains of darkness, eventually the mountains will move, and the light will start to shine through. And, you know, with this level of surrender, when you give up hope, you are actually surrendering. And in that surrender is when all of this beauty can really become a transformative experience for you. And you witness this one time, and there's no going back. When you witness the miracle that is change, the miracle that is the inner and outer world reflecting each other, you will no longer sit in a place of faithlessness or a lack of belief in the power of you. You know,
massively.
It's beautiful.
It is beautiful. And I think every day I feel some sense of gratitude and blessings at even just sometimes the most simplest of things. You know, I've apparently as a Taurus, I'm meant to be good at gardening, and I haven't grown anything over the years. But this year I thought, no, I'm going to give it a go. And I've sent you pictures, haven't I? And I planted some seeds, and it's the pride that you get when, you know, you plant a seed and it starts to sprout, and it relies on the sun and the rains, or you watering it, you know. So you need the food, you need the light, you need the water. And the tomatoes, I just moved the plant in the back. I've got 4 now, and they're growing into what are starting to look like proper tomatoes. And that alone, that activity, and I sit and I didn't realize I was doing it, but I kind of do this with a few things now. The meditation now is me sitting in the chair, watching, looking at the tomato plants and being in awe that they started from nothing as a tiny seed,
from a seed,
and now they're about, I don't know, 2 foot high, and will yield something. And so that's nature showing us that from every seed, something grows.
The power
so
of
what
a seed.
seeds do you want to sow?
Exactly.
Yeah.
I love that. That's beautiful. I actually, you know, like simplifying things in this external world helps you understand your internal nature. I'm a Gemini. I'm an air sign. And my mother was not a green thumb. So I naturally just kind of stayed away from any green thumb experiences. And now I keep plants everywhere, and to allow myself to witness these things that I didn't think I could have any power in helping, to watch them grow and thrive and under my care tells me that I am such a mothering energy, that I am so capable of watering and feeding
and nurturing.
And allowing something to thrive outside of me. I can do that for myself. And it's such a beautiful reflection that you just made in that it's true. We are all gardeners in this journey, and the seeds that we plant will sprout. And some things need a little bit more care. And that's okay, because those things that need a little more care are going to produce the most beautiful fruiting plant that you've ever experienced. And it was worth the tender care. It was worth the gentle nature you took with it, because we are, at the end of the day, trying to create an existence for ourselves that's beautiful and wonderful, and that we're happy to wake up to. And when we go to sleep at night is filled with the beauty of the thoughts that we have, instead of the negative, you know, red dirt emotions that doesn't grow anything.
Yeah. And actually, as we're closing this, the thing to consider is, if you're listening to podcasts that are positive, listening to things, music that is healing and the frequency connects with you before bedtime, is another way of eradicating a process, because it's quite common people will lie in bed and regurgitate the thoughts of the day, usually the unpleasant ones. So what seeds you plant before you go to bed are going to be the ones that start sprouting when you wake up. And setting the intention before you go to bed to sleep well, to rest well, to allow your body to heal, and setting the intention when you wake up to have a good day, a prosperous day, and then deciding what you want your day to look like. Are the 3 things that you can start doing without even joining the gym and going, you know,
or eating healthier, or you know, still remaining in friendships or other relationships that are not healthy for you, you know. I will say that at night I listen to subliminal messaging. So I am married, so my significant other plays a role in what I listen to at night, because that person also has to sleep in bed. So we have found one that works for us, and it's crickets, and we listen to the crickets, but the crickets have subliminal messaging under it. And so, but I've really noticed since the beginning, and we listen to different ones, you know. I think the one that did the most massive work was stop caring what other people think about you. And it took about 2 weeks. And there was a few of those days I woke up cranky, because I know that I was in my sleep. I was,
Processing.
unconsciously fighting those
Yeah.
demons. But when I would wake up, I then would turn it to a frequency that was, ridding myself of negative feelings or energy. And it would just be more music again. And at night, we have this thing where I say, I hope you sleep well. And then the
Yeah.
other person says, I will. And that
Yeah.
is an affirmation statement of
Yeah.
affirmation statements. And then when that person leaves, have a great day. I will have a great day. And
Yeah.
just to say those things. And so if you don't have a person in the bed with you, look in the mirror and say it,
Yeah.
or imagine yourself, outside of yourself and say, you sleep well. And then you respond, I will sleep well. And when you wake up in the morning, I will have a good day. I am going to have a good day, because
Yeah.
these little things add up to massive things. And those massive
Oh.
things are life-changing.
Yeah. You connect the dots and they all join up. And I think on that note, have a beautiful evening and a restful sleep.
You do the same, because I plan to.
I definitely plan to. Great talking with you again. I think there's going to be a part 3.
Probably.
So we look forward to doing that. Thanks, Danielle.
Thank you.
See you soon.